If your last name is on this list, your ancestors did not simply worship inside the story of Israel. They served inside it. They carried the vessels, guarded the gates, and sang the psalms in the courts of the temple. And when the temple fell, they carried out of the ruins the one thing no army could confiscate: a name. These 10 surnames appear in biblical genealogies, in medieval rabbinic registers, in synagogue records kept across Spain, Germany, Poland, and Bohemia, and in one of the most remarkable genetic studies ever published. And most of the families who carry them have no idea what they hold. Stay until number 1, because that surname belongs to a priestly line that geneticists traced through the male line, father to son, across roughly 3,000 years, and the result was published in Nature. Before we open the records, one thing. If the history hidden inside family names matters to you, subscribe to the channel and leave your surname in the comments right now. Some of you are going to find yourselves on this list before the end. Number 10. Levitan. Also, Levitin and Levitansky, scattered across Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine. The root is transparent once you see it. Levi, with a Slavic suffix attached. The fingerprint of a family that carried a Hebrew identity into Eastern Europe and let the local language wrap around it. The tribe of Levi descends from the third son of Jacob and Leah, and it was the only tribe in Israel that received no territory. When the land was divided, Levi was given something else: scattered cities, a share in the offerings, and a sentence in the book of Numbers that explains how this family survived. The Lord is their inheritance. A tribe with no land cannot be conquered the way other tribes are. There is no border to lose. What Levi carried was portable: function, memory, name. In the Russian Empire, when surnames were imposed on Jewish communities by imperial decree, thousands of families were assigned names by clerks who had never met them. But families with a Levite tradition insisted on keeping the root visible. Levitan is what that insistence looks like after 2 centuries of Slavic grammar. If your name is Levitan, your bloodline refused to let a bureaucracy erase what your family had already been carrying for 3,000 years. The next surname sounds German. It looks German. It sits in municipal records beside merchants and vintners of the Rhineland. And behind it stands a tradition that has nothing to do with Germany at all. Number 9, Weil. Also, Weil, and Weiler. The name is locational, from one of several towns called Weil in southwestern Germany. This is how most Ashkenazi surnames were formed. A family lived in a place, the place became the name, and the older identity moved underneath. But among families named Weil, a Levite tradition was recorded and transmitted for centuries alongside the name itself. The most significant bearer was Rabbi Jacob Weil, a 15th century legal authority, whose rulings were copied and cited for generations after his death. And here is the mechanism that made all of this traceable. Levite status was never a private claim. It was recorded because it carried duties. A Levite is called to the Torah second after the priest in a sequence maintained in synagogues for more than 1,000 years. That created a paper trail, week after week, in every community the family ever lived in. If your name is Weil, your bloodline may carry a Levite tradition that outlasted the town it was named after. Number 8 points to a small castle in the hills of Hesse and to one of the most carefully documented rabbinic lineages in Central Europe. Number 8. Epstein. From Epstein, a town and fortress in the Taunus Hills northwest of Frankfurt, first appearing in records in the 12th century. Jewish families living under the protection of the local lords carried the place name east into Bohemia, Moravia, and Poland, which is why a surname anchored to one German hillside is now carried across 4 continents. And attached to it, throughout the rabbinic literature, is a Levite tradition maintained across centuries. The Epstein line produced scholars and legal authorities in Prague, Vienna, and Lublin, and their genealogies were preserved with a precision researchers still rely on. Understand why this mattered. A Levite in a functioning community was not holding a symbolic title. He washed the hands of the priest before the priestly blessing, an act still performed in synagogues today in front of the entire congregation. A family could not quietly invent that role. Everyone in the room would have known. If your name is Epstein, Your bloodline is tied to a German fortress town and to a service performed publicly, in front of witnesses, for as long as anyone can remember. Number 7 carries the name of a Bohemian village and one of the great dynasties of Jewish scholarship, a family so tied to Levite descent that it is embedded in the way they signed their own books. Number 7. Horowitz. Also Horowitz, Hurwitz, Gurevich, and Gurevitz, the last two being the same root after passing through Russian. The origin is Hojovice, a town in Bohemia southwest of Prague. The Horowitz family became one of the best documented rabbinic lineages in Europe, and its members signed themselves with the Levite designation attached to the name generation after generation. The most famous was Isaiah Horowitz, born around 1565, a rabbi in Prague, Frankfurt, and Poznan, who left Europe entirely and settled in the land of Israel, where he died in Tiberias. His major work became so widely studied that the man himself is now known by the title of the book, rather than by his own name. What this line demonstrates is continuity under pressure. Expulsions, plagues, forced relocations, borders redrawn again and again, and through all of it the same designation, traveling with the same family. If your name is Horowitz, in any of its spellings, your bloodline carried a tribal identity from a Bohemian village into half the languages of Europe without ever setting it down. Number 6 is the only surname on this list that does not hide the connection at all. It states it in Hebrew out loud, and it has been doing so for 900 years. Number 6, Halevi. Also, Halevi, Halevi, and Levi with a definite article attached. It is not a description. It is a declaration. The Hebrew means precisely the Levite. These families were not adopting a place or a trade. They were announcing lineage in the name itself, which is why it appears most heavily in Sephardic communities in Spain, North Africa, the Ottoman Empire, and later throughout the Americas. The most celebrated bearer was Judah Halevi, born in Spain around 1075, a physician, a philosopher, and one of the greatest poets ever to write in Hebrew. He wrote of Jerusalem while living in Toledo, and at the end of his life, he left the security of Spain to travel toward the city he had spent decades writing about. He is believed to have died on that journey. His poems are still recited in synagogues 9 centuries later. If your name is Halevi or Halevi, your bloodline did not preserve a tribal identity by accident. Your ancestors chose to wear it in the open, in a language most of their neighbors could not read. Number 5 is not a name in the ordinary sense. It is a set of initials, 3 Hebrew letters, compressed into one word, describing a rank inside the temple hierarchy. Number 5, Segal, also Segal, Segal, and Shagal. The name is an acronym from a Hebrew phrase meaning deputy of the Levites. The officer who stood second in the service, organizing the rotations, supervising the divisions of singers and gatekeepers, described in the Book of Chronicles. Those chapters are not poetry, they are administration. Names, families, assignments, watches. The temple ran on a schedule, and someone maintained that schedule. Centuries later, families descended from that function, turned the initials into a surname, and the abbreviation became a word the world now reads without knowing it is one. The painter Marc Chagall carried a variant of it. Understand what that means. A family took a job title from a building destroyed in the year 70, folded it into 3 letters, and carried them through Ukraine, France, and the United States. If your name is Segal or Chagall, your bloodline carries the initials of an office that has not existed for nearly 2,000 years and has still not been put down. Now we cross a line inside the tribe itself. The next 4 names do not belong to the Levites in general. They belong to one family within Levi, descended from a single man whose restrictions were stricter and whose identity was tracked more carefully than any other line in Israel. Number 4. Kaplan, also Kaplan, Kapelowitz, and Kaplansky, concentrated in Lithuania, Poland, and Belarus, and among the most common surnames in the Jewish communities there. The origin is not Hebrew at all. It arrives through Polish and German from the Latin word for chaplain, a man in priestly service, and that is precisely why it was adopted. When Jewish families in Slavic lands were required to register surnames, the local word for a priest was applied to families who were, in their own tradition, exactly that. not Levites in the broad sense, but Kohanim, descendants of Aaron, brother of Moses, first high priest of Israel. The Kohanim are a branch within Levi, and their obligations were heavier. They pronounced the priestly blessing over the congregation, and they were bound by rules of marriage and ritual purity that did not apply to other Levites. Many of those restrictions are still observed today. If your name is Kaplan, your bloodline was translated into a foreign word by a foreign clerk, and the meaning underneath survived the translation completely intact. Number 3 is the name of a family that produced legal authorities across 4 countries and whose priestly designation appears on title pages, going back to the 16th century. Number 3, Rappaport. Also, Rappaport, Rappaport, and Rappaport. The origin is disputed and probably composite, combining an Italian element, likely from the city of Porto, with a trajectory that carried the name into Poland, Galicia, and Ukraine. What is not disputed is the designation the family attached to it. Abraham Menahem Rappaport, a rabbi and legal authority active in Poland around the turn of the 17th century, and the scholars who followed him, are recorded with the priestly title beside the name. This is the great advantage of tracing names inside this tradition. A rabbinic family's genealogy was never private. It appeared on title pages, in approbations printed at the front of books, in correspondence between communities hundreds of miles apart. If your name is Rappaport in any spelling, your bloodline is written into the front matter of books printed before the founding of the United States. Number 2 is 2 letters long, one of the shortest surnames in existence. And inside those 2 letters sits a complete sentence about who your family was. Number 2, Katz. It is not the German word for cat, which is what nearly everyone assumes on first encounter. It is an acronym formed from the initials of a Hebrew phrase, meaning righteous priest. 2 letters, 1 claim, carried by families across Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania for centuries. Consider the compression. A family takes a rank of priestly service, reduces it to 2 initials, and those initials pass through 100 border changes, a dozen languages, and 2 continents, arriving today as an ordinary short surname on a mailbox in New Jersey. And one honest thing has to be said here because it protects everything else on this list. A surname is evidence. It is not proof. Names were adopted, altered, and imposed, and Katz, Kaplan, and Cohen all appear today in families with no priestly tradition at all. What the name gives you is a thread. If your name is Katz, your bloodline carries 2 letters standing for a rank inside the temple, and a thread worth pulling. And now number 1. This surname is the most direct claim of descent anywhere in the Jewish world, maintained without interruption for as long as records exist. And in 1997, geneticists decided to test whether the claim actually held. What they found was published in Nature, and it changed the way researchers think about oral tradition. Number 1, Cohen. Also, Kohn, Khan, Kagan, Kohn, and Kaganovich. The Hebrew word means simply priest, not a place, not a trade, not a clerk's invention. A statement of descent from Aaron, transmitted from father to son for as long as the tradition has existed. And here is why that detail matters scientifically. Priestly status in this tradition passes exclusively through the male line. The Y chromosome also passes exclusively through the male line, from father to son, largely unchanged, which means the tradition made a testable prediction. If it had held across the centuries, men who identified as Kohanim, scattered across communities separated by thousands of miles and 1,000 years, should carry a shared genetic signature. Researchers led by Karl Skorecki, working with Michael Hammer and David Goldstein, tested exactly that. They sampled men from Ashkenazi and Sephardic communities, populations separated since the early medieval period. The results, published in Nature in 1997 and expanded the following year, identified a distinctive Y chromosome pattern now known as the Cohen modal haplotype. It appeared in roughly half of the men who identified as Kohanim in both communities, against a small fraction of the general Jewish population. Estimates placed their common ancestor 3,000 years in the past. Not mythology, not family legend, a measurable signal in living men, matching a tradition maintained by nothing more than fathers telling sons who they were. If your name is Cohen, in any of its spellings, your bloodline may carry the oldest continuously transmitted job description on Earth, and there is a real possibility it is written into your chromosomes. 10 surnames, 10 corridors, leading back through exile roads and imposed registries, through bohemian villages and Spanish courtyards, through psalms sung in a building that no longer stands, and through a tribe given no land so that it could never be dispossessed. Your name is not just a name. It is a tribe. It is a duty. It is a line of men who kept telling their sons the same sentence for 3,000 years and who turned out, when someone finally checked, to have been telling the truth. Drop your surname in the comments and tell me whether it appears on this list or what your family has always said about where the name came from. Those traditions have a habit of turning out older than anyone expected. And if you made it to the end of this video, subscribe to the channel. Every week, another name, another bloodline, another history that nobody told you was yours. The next video is already waiting for you.